The cardboard beneath Marcus Rivera feels damp from the morning dew as he watches the sun rise over downtown Phoenix, casting long shadows between the towering glass buildings that house people with warm beds and steady paychecks. At 53, the former Army medic has learned to measure time not in days or weeks, but in the small victories that keep him moving forward. Finding a safe place to sleep, earning enough for a meal, staying invisible to those who see homeless veterans as problems to be moved along rather than people who once served their country. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. Marcus adjusts the worn military jacket that still bears his medic patches, the fabric faded but the pride intact. The early morning hours have become his favorite time, when the city moves with purpose but hasn't yet filled with the rush of people who avoid eye contact with someone like him. His shopping cart, loaded with everything he owns, sits nearby like a faithful companion that asks no questions and judges no choices. The veteran disability check that arrives monthly covers a cheap motel room for about a week, leaving him to navigate the remaining 3 weeks with the resourcefulness he learned during 3 tours in Afghanistan. The PTSD that ended his military career also ended his marriage, his job as a civilian paramedic, and eventually his apartment. Each loss had felt like another piece of himself disappearing, until he'd stopped trying to hold on to anything that required him to be someone he could no longer recognize in the mirror. Dr. Chen had been his psychiatrist at the VA hospital for 2 years before budget cuts eliminated her position and left Marcus without the counseling that had been slowly helping him rebuild. The medication for his nightmares costs more than his food budget, so most months he chooses to eat and lets the dreams do what they will. Sleep has become something he endures rather than seeks, filled with sounds of explosions and faces of soldiers he couldn't save despite his medical training. The morning routine that keeps Marcus anchored begins with checking his small camp behind the dumpster of Chen's family restaurant, where the owner, an elderly Vietnamese immigrant named Mr. Nguyen, pretends not to notice Marcus sleeping there in exchange for Marcus keeping the area clean and safe. Mr. Nguyen never speaks about his own experiences as a refugee, but sometimes he leaves containers of leftover soup where Marcus will find them, understanding between veterans extending across different wars and different outcomes. Marcus's military training serves him well on the streets, where situational awareness can mean the difference between safety and trouble. He knows which corners to avoid during certain hours, which shop owners might call police versus those who might offer odd jobs, and how to read the body language of people who might pose threats. The skills that kept him alive in combat zones now help him navigate the urban battlefield of homelessness. The morning is interrupted by shouting from the direction of Central Avenue, where the early commuter traffic moves in predictable patterns. Marcus looks up to see an elderly man in expensive pajamas wandering into the street, oblivious to the cars that swerve and honk around him. The man appears confused and frightened, calling out names that the rushing drivers can't hear over their engines and radio. Without thinking, Marcus abandons his cart and runs toward the intersection, his medic instincts overriding the self-preservation that usually keeps him from drawing attention to himself. The elderly man stands in the middle of the crosswalk as the traffic light cycles through its colors, tears streaming down his face as he turns in circles, searching for something or someone that exists only in his memory. Marcus reaches the man just as a delivery truck barrels through the intersection, its driver focused on his phone rather than the road ahead. Marcus wraps his arms around the elderly man and pulls him onto the sidewalk as the truck's horn blares past them, the driver never realizing how close he came to tragedy. The man Marcus has rescued appears to be in his 70s, well-groomed despite his inappropriate clothing, with soft hands that suggest a life spent far from physical labor. His eyes hold the particular confusion that Marcus recognizes from his grandfather's final years, when Alzheimer's disease transformed a sharp-minded mechanic into someone who got lost in his own neighborhood. "Elizabeth? Where is Elizabeth?" the man asks, gripping Marcus's jacket with surprising strength. "I can't find Elizabeth. She was just here." "She was just here." His voice carries the educated accent of someone accustomed to being heard and respected, but now reduced to the helpless pleading of a child separated from his mother in a crowd. Marcus guides the man to a bench outside a coffee shop, using the same calm voice he'd employed with wounded soldiers who were scared and disoriented. "It's okay, sir. You're safe now. Let's sit down and figure out where you need to be. Can you tell me your name?" The man looks at Marcus with eyes that seem to focus and unfocus like a camera struggling to find the right lens. My name? My name is... He pauses, the frustration evident as he grasps for information that should be automatic, but has become elusive. William. Yes, William. William Hartwell. But Elizabeth. I need to find Elizabeth. Marcus recognizes the pattern from his grandfather's decline. The man knows his name, but struggles with recent memories, holding on to fragments of the past, while the present moment slips away like water through his fingers. The expensive silk pajamas and leather slippers suggest William comes from wealth, but wealth can't protect against the cruel democracy of dementia that strips away dignity regardless of bank account balances. William! That's a good strong name, Marcus says, his voice steady and reassuring. I'm Marcus, and I'm going to help you find Elizabeth. But first, let's make sure you're not hurt. Did you fall or bump into anything while you were walking? Marcus's medical training kicks in as he performs a quick visual assessment, checking for obvious injuries or signs of distress beyond the confusion. William's vital signs appear stable, though his breathing is elevated from anxiety rather than physical exertion. The man's pajamas are expensive silk, probably custom-made, and his wedding ring bears an inscription too worn to read but suggesting decades of marriage. The coffee shop's manager, a young woman with kind eyes and a name tag reading Jessica, approaches with obvious concern. Is everything okay? I saw what happened in the street. Should I call an ambulance? Marcus considers the options while keeping one eye on William, who has begun scanning the sidewalk as if Elizabeth might materialize from behind a parked car. Let me try to reach his family first. Sometimes with Alzheimer's patients, the hospital can be more confusing than helpful. Jessica nods and brings 2 cups of coffee without being asked, the steam rising in the cool morning air like small prayers for clarity. Marcus accepts the gesture gratefully, realizing that his appearance as a homeless veteran might normally discourage such kindness, but his obvious care for William has shifted the dynamic. Marcus checks William's pajama pockets, hoping to find identification or emergency contact information, but discovers only a small silver locket containing the photograph of a beautiful woman with gentle eyes and graying hair. The inscription inside reads, "Elizabeth, my heart, my home, forever yours, William." Is this Elizabeth? Marcus shows William the locket, watching as the man's face transforms with recognition and relief. Yes, that's my Elizabeth. My beautiful Elizabeth. We're supposed to have breakfast together. She makes the most wonderful pancakes. She must be worried sick. William's voice carries the love of a man who has cherished the same woman for decades, even as his mind struggles to place her in his current reality. Marcus realizes. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now, back to the story. That Elizabeth might be William's deceased wife, a common confusion among Alzheimer's patients who sometimes believe they're living in earlier decades when their spouses were still alive. The depth of William's love for her, preserved even as other memories fade, touches something in Marcus that he thought had been numbed by years of loss and disappointment. William, do you remember where you live? What's your address? Marcus asks gently, hoping to find clues that might lead to family members or caregivers who are probably frantic with worry. William's brow furrows with concentration, his hands working nervously as he searches for information that feels just beyond his reach. The house. The big house with the garden. Elizabeth loves the roses. Red roses. She plants them every spring. He pauses, and for a moment his eyes clear with sharp focus. Hartwell Pharmaceuticals. I built that company from nothing. I built it for Elizabeth so she could have everything she deserved. The name Hartwell Pharmaceuticals hits Marcus like a physical blow. Even someone who's been homeless for 3 years recognizes one of the largest pharmaceutical companies in the world, responsible for developing medications that have saved millions of lives and generated billions in revenue. If this confused elderly man is connected to that empire, his family will have resources to find him that most missing persons cases could never access. Marcus pulls out his cracked smartphone, grateful that the prepaid plan still has data, and searches for Hartwell Pharmaceuticals' executive information. What he finds makes him realize that the man he rescued from traffic isn't just connected to the company. According to the search results, William Hartwell is the founder and former CEO, worth an estimated $12 billion. The contrast between William's obvious wealth and Marcus's homelessness feels surreal, two men from completely different worlds brought together by chance and circumstance. Yet sitting on the bench outside the coffee shop, William's confusion and vulnerability make wealth irrelevant. He's simply an elderly man who needs help, and Marcus is someone trained to provide it. "William, I think I can help you get home," Marcus says carefully. "But I need you to stay right here with me while I make some phone calls." "Can you do that?" William nods eagerly, his trust in Marcus complete, despite having known him for less than an hour. There's something about Marcus's calm competence and genuine care that penetrates William's confusion, providing the anchor he desperately needs in a world that has become frighteningly unpredictable. Marcus searches for Hartwell Pharmaceutical's contact information, hoping to reach someone who can confirm William's identity and arrange for his safe return. The company's main number connects him to a sophisticated phone system that seems designed to prevent exactly the kind of call he's trying to make. After navigating through multiple menu options, Marcus finally reaches a human voice, a receptionist who sounds professionally polite but harried. "Hartwell Pharmaceuticals, how may I direct your call?" "I need to speak with someone about William Hartwell. I believe he's missing, and I found him. He appears to have Alzheimer's and is confused about where he is." The line goes silent for several seconds before the receptionist responds with obvious tension. "Sir, I'm going to transfer you to our security department. Please hold." Marcus waits on hold for nearly 10 minutes, during which William begins to grow agitated again, asking repeatedly about Elizabeth and whether they'll be late for breakfast. Marcus keeps him calm by engaging him in conversation about the roses Elizabeth loved, finding that William's face lights up when he talks about his wife, even as other details remain frustratingly elusive. When security finally answers, the voice is curt and suspicious. "This is Director Barnes. You're calling about Mr. Hartwell?" "Yes, I found an elderly man who identifies himself as William Hartwell. He was wandering in traffic downtown Phoenix wearing pajamas and appears to have dementia. I'm a former Army medic and I've been keeping him safe while trying to contact his family." "Where exactly are you located?" Barnes asks, and Marcus can hear typing in the background, as if his call is being traced or recorded. Marcus provides the coffee shop's address and his own name, expecting Barnes to express relief that William has been found safe. Instead, the security director's response surprises him with its coldness. "Sir, I need you to understand that there are protocols for this situation. Remain exactly where you are. Do not speak to anyone else about this matter, and do not contact media or post anything on social media. A team will be there within 30 minutes to handle the situation." The line goes dead before Marcus can ask any questions, leaving him staring at his phone with growing unease. Something about the conversation felt wrong, more like he'd reported a security breach than a missing person. The emphasis on secrecy and the delay in sending help suggest complications beyond a simple case of a confused elderly man wandering away from home. Marcus looks at William, who has found a pigeon to watch with childlike fascination, unaware that his disappearance has apparently triggered corporate security protocols rather than family concern. The disconnect between William's obvious vulnerability and the company's reaction raises questions about family dynamics and motivations that Marcus doesn't yet understand. Jessica brings fresh coffee and a small plate of pastries, refusing Marcus's offer to pay with a kindness that reminds him how long it's been since strangers treated him with simple human dignity. "How's he doing?" she asks quietly, nodding toward William. "Confused but stable," Marcus replies. "His family should be here soon." He doesn't mention the strange conversation with Hartwell Pharmaceutical security, uncertain whether his instincts about the situation are colored by years of mistrust toward institutions that have failed him repeatedly. William picks at a pastry while humming a melody that might be a song he once danced to with Elizabeth, his contentment in the moment touching despite the circumstances that brought him here. Marcus realizes that whatever wealth and success William accumulated during his career, right now he's simply an elderly man who needs protection and care. The same basic human needs that Marcus struggles to meet for himself every day. The morning sun climbs higher over Phoenix, bringing with it the heat that will eventually drive everyone indoors. But for now, the sidewalk remains comfortable. Marcus settles in to wait for William's family, unaware that the next 30 minutes will reveal a family drama that makes his own losses seem simple by comparison, and that his act of kindness toward a stranger will ultimately transform both their lives in ways neither could imagine. As they wait, William suddenly grips Marcus's arm with urgent intensity. "Marcus, you're a good man. Elizabeth would like you. She always said you can tell everything about a person by how they treat strangers." His eyes clear for a moment with the sharp intelligence that built a pharmaceutical empire. "Promise me something. If anything happens to me, if I get confused again, promise you'll remember that Elizabeth was the most important thing in my life. Everything I built was for her." Marcus promises, not understanding why the request feels so urgent, or why William's momentary clarity seems like a warning about challenges ahead. Within the hour, he'll discover that William's family sees his disappearance not as a medical emergency requiring compassion, but as a legal problem requiring management. And Marcus, the homeless veteran who stopped traffic to save a stranger, will find himself at the center of a battle over $12 billion, where his actions define the difference between justice and exploitation. The black Mercedes sedan that pulls up to the coffee shop 37 minutes later carries 3 passengers who emerge with the coordinated efficiency of people accustomed to managing crises. Marcus recognizes the lead figure as someone who commands immediate attention. A woman in her 40s wearing an expensive business suit and the kind of confidence that comes from never doubting you'll get what you want. Dr. Patricia Hartwell approaches the bench where Marcus sits with her father, her expression combining relief with barely concealed irritation. Behind her, a man in a security company uniform scans the area with professional paranoia, while a third person, carrying a medical bag, appears to be a private physician or nurse. "Dad, there you are," Patricia says, her voice carefully modulated to sound loving despite the tension Marcus can sense beneath the surface. "We've been so worried about you. How did you get all the way downtown?" William looks up at his daughter with the same confusion he's shown about everything else this morning, no recognition flickering in his eyes, despite her obvious familiarity with him. "I'm sorry, miss, but I don't believe we've met. I'm William Hartwell, and I'm looking for my wife, Elizabeth. This kind gentleman has been helping me." Patricia's jaw tightens almost imperceptibly at her father's failure to recognize her, but she maintains her composed facade. "Of course, Dad. We'll find Elizabeth. But first, let's get you somewhere safe and comfortable." Marcus stands as the group approaches, his protective instincts on alert, despite the apparent relief of William being reunited with family. Something about Patricia's demeanor feels calculated rather than genuinely concerned, and the presence of security personnel for what should be a simple family reunion suggests complications beyond dementia care. "You must be the person who called our office." Patricia extends her hand to Marcus with professional courtesy. "I'm Dr. Patricia Hartwell, William's daughter. Thank you for keeping him safe. I can't imagine what might have happened if you hadn't been there." Marcus shakes her hand, noting that her grip is firm but brief, as if prolonged contact with a homeless veteran might be distasteful. "I'm Marcus Rivera. Your father was wandering in traffic when I found him. He seems to have Alzheimer's or some form of dementia, but he's been calm and cooperative." "Yes, Dad's condition has been deteriorating rapidly," Patricia explains, though her clinical tone suggests she's discussing a medical case rather than her father's declining health. "We've been exploring care options, but he's been resistant to accepting help. This episode confirms that he can no longer live independently." Marcus watches William, who has returned to watching the pigeons with childlike interest, apparently unaware that decisions about his future are being made around him. The disconnect between William's obvious need for care and Patricia's businesslike approach to his condition creates an uncomfortable dynamic that Marcus can't quite define. The medical professional, introduced as Dr. Reynolds, begins a gentle examination of William, checking his vital signs and asking simple questions designed to assess his mental state. William cooperates cheerfully, responding to Dr. Reynolds with the same trust he's shown Marcus, apparently comfortable with anyone who treats him with kindness and respect. "Has he mentioned anything about Elizabeth?" Patricia asks Marcus quietly, moving slightly away from her father. "She was our mother. She passed away 18 months ago, but Dad often believes she's still alive. It's one of the more distressing aspects of his condition." Marcus feels a pang of sympathy for William, understanding now why the man's search for Elizabeth had been so urgent and heartbreaking. Losing a spouse after decades of marriage would be devastating under any circumstances, but having that loss complicated by dementia, where grief can't even provide closure, seems especially cruel. He talked about her constantly, Marcus tells Patricia. He has a locket with her picture, and he mentioned that they were supposed to have breakfast together. He clearly loved her very much. Patricia's expression softened slightly, the first genuine emotion Marcus has seen from her. They were married for 47 years. Mom's death hit him hard, and we think the grief accelerated his cognitive decline. He's been increasingly confused about time and place, sometimes believing he's still a young man building his company. Marcus nods, remembering William's mention of Hartwell Pharmaceuticals and his pride in building the company for Elizabeth. The man's entire identity seems wrapped up in his love for his wife and his success in providing for her, making his current helplessness particularly poignant. Dr. Reynolds completes his examination and speaks quietly with Patricia, their conversation too low for Marcus to overhear. He notices, however, that both of them glance repeatedly at William and then at Marcus, as if his presence complicates their plans in some way. Mr. Rivera. Patricia approaches Marcus again, this time with what appears to be a prepared statement. My family is incredibly grateful for what you've done today. Dad could have been seriously injured or worse if you hadn't intervened. We'd like to show our appreciation for your heroism. She produces an envelope from her purse, extending it toward Marcus with the practiced gesture of someone accustomed to solving problems with money. This is a small token of our gratitude. We understand that you've probably had expenses today, lost time from work, and we want to make sure you're compensated for your kindness. Marcus accepts the envelope but doesn't open it, sensing that whatever amount it contains is intended to conclude his involvement with the Hartwell family, rather than simply express thanks. The offer feels more like a transaction than genuine gratitude, and he wonders what Patricia hopes to purchase with her gesture. Ma'am, I don't need any payment, Marcus says, trying to hand the envelope back. I just did what anyone should do when they see someone in trouble. Your father is a good man, and I'm glad he's safe. Patricia's surprise at his refusal suggests she's not accustomed to people declining her family's money. Please, I insist. You've done something extraordinary, and extraordinary actions deserve recognition. Before Marcus can respond, William suddenly stands up with agitation, looking around the sidewalk as if he's just realized where he is. Elizabeth! Where is Elizabeth? She must be so worried. I need to get home. She'll be making breakfast, and I promised I'd help her with the garden today. Dr. Reynolds moves quickly to William's side, his voice soothing and professional. Mr. Hartwell, it's okay. We're going to take you somewhere safe where you can rest. Elizabeth knows where you are. Marcus watches as Dr. Reynolds produces a small syringe from his medical bag, clearly preparing to sedate William for transport. The efficiency of the action suggests this scenario has been planned in advance, and Marcus wonders if William's family was already preparing to institutionalize him before this morning's incident. Wait, Marcus says, stepping closer to William. He's been calm and cooperative all morning. Why does he need sedation? Patricia's expression hardens at Marcus's question, the brief softness disappearing behind professional composure. Mr. Rivera, I appreciate your concern, but this is a family matter. Dad can become agitated during transport, and Dr. Reynolds is simply taking precautions to ensure his safety and comfort. Marcus's military and medical training makes him uncomfortable with medicating a patient who isn't currently displaying symptoms that require intervention. William appears anxious but not dangerous to himself or others, and Marcus has seen how gentle conversation can calm his confusion. William, Marcus says, approaching the elderly man with the same calm voice he's used all morning. Remember what you told me about Elizabeth and the roses? She planted red roses every spring because they were beautiful and strong, just like her love for you. She would want you to be safe and comfortable, wouldn't she? William's agitation visibly decreases as Marcus speaks, his breathing slowing and his shoulders relaxing. Yes, Elizabeth loved those roses. She said they reminded her that beautiful things could grow anywhere if you took proper care of them. Marcus glances at Patricia and Dr. Reynolds, both of whom are watching the interaction with expressions he can't quite read. Maybe he doesn't need medication if he stays calm. Sometimes people with dementia respond better to familiar voices and gentle guidance. Dr. Reynolds exchanges a look with Patricia before putting the syringe away, though Marcus notices he keeps it within easy reach. You're right, Mr. Rivera. If he remains cooperative, we can avoid sedation. As they prepare to help William into the Mercedes, Marcus realizes this will probably be the last time he sees the man who has occupied his morning and touched his heart. Despite their vastly different backgrounds and circumstances, he feels a connection to William that goes beyond their brief time together. "William," Marcus says, taking the elderly man's hand in both of his. "It's been an honor to meet you. Take care of yourself, and remember what you told me about Elizabeth." She sounds like she was an amazing woman. William looks at Marcus with a moment of clarity that seems to pierce through the confusion. "Marcus, you're a good man. A very good man. Elizabeth would say you have a good heart, and that's the most important thing in the world." As the Mercedes drives away with William safely secured in the back seat between Patricia and Dr. Reynolds, Marcus watches until the expensive car disappears into Phoenix traffic. He still holds the envelope Patricia gave him, unopened and forgotten in the strange mix of emotions that follows, saying goodbye to someone who briefly made him feel useful and needed again. Marcus finally opens the envelope as he walks back to retrieve his shopping cart from behind Chen's family restaurant. Inside, he finds 5 crisp $100 bills and a business card for Patricia Hartwell, MD, with a handwritten note. "Thank you for your service to our family and our country. If you ever need anything, please don't hesitate to call." $500 represents more money than Marcus has had at one time since becoming homeless, enough to pay for a motel room for 2 weeks or buy good meals for a month. Yet something about the transaction feels incomplete, as if important questions were asked but never answered, and as if his brief connection with William was more significant than Patricia seemed to acknowledge. That evening, as Marcus sits in the small motel room that Patricia's money has purchased, he finds himself thinking about William's words about Elizabeth and about the love that survived, even as memory failed. For the first time in years, Marcus wonders if he's given up too easily on rebuilding connections with other people, if his own losses have made him forget that love and purpose can grow anywhere if properly tended. 3 days later, Marcus reads a small item in the Phoenix newspaper about William Hartwell being committed to a private memory care facility, following what the article describes as a recent incident demonstrating his inability to care for himself independently. The article quotes Patricia Hartwell as saying that the family made the difficult decision to ensure her father's safety and dignity during his declining years. Marcus stares at the newspaper, remembering William's moments of clarity and his obvious intelligence despite his confusion. Something about the article bothers him, though he can't identify exactly what feels wrong about the family's decision to institutionalize a man who seemed gentle and cooperative when treated with patience and respect. A week later, Marcus encounters Mrs. Chen, the daughter of the restaurant owner who has allowed him to camp behind their building. She approaches him with obvious excitement, carrying a newspaper folded to reveal a much larger article about Hartwell Pharmaceuticals. "Marcus, isn't this the man you helped?" she asks, pointing to a photograph of William taken during his years as CEO. "My mother saw you talking to police about finding him." This article says his family is fighting over control of his company because of his mental condition. Marcus reads the article with growing unease, learning details about the Hartwell family that cast Patricia's behavior in a different light. According to the Financial Reporter, William's commitment to the memory care facility has triggered a legal process that will transfer control of his $12 billion fortune to his children, with Patricia assuming leadership of the family foundation and her brother David taking over the pharmaceutical company. The article mentions that William had recently been discussing changes to his will and charitable giving plans, but that his diagnosed dementia has been ruled to make him legally incompetent to make such decisions. Several board members are quoted as expressing concerns about the timing of his commitment and whether proper medical procedures were followed. Marcus feels a chill as he remembers Dr. Reynolds' prepared syringe and Patricia's insistence on maintaining secrecy about William's rescue. What if William's morning confusion hadn't been a random episode of dementia, but rather a symptom of medication or medical intervention designed to demonstrate his incompetence at a crucial moment in family financial planning? The more Marcus thinks about the timeline, the more questions arise about Patricia's motivations and methods. If William had been planning to change his will or increase his charitable giving, his children would have strong financial incentives to have him declared incompetent before those changes could be implemented. Marcus realizes that his role in rescuing William might have inadvertently provided the family with the evidence they needed to justify his commitment. The incident of William wandering in traffic, witnessed by an objective third party and documented by hospital records, would be powerful proof of his inability to care for himself independently. Yet Marcus remembers William's moments of clarity, his obvious intelligence and emotional awareness, and his capacity for meaningful conversation when treated with respect rather than managed like a problem. The man Marcus spent the morning with didn't seem incompetent so much as confused and grieving. Struggling with loss and memory, but still fundamentally himself, Marcus makes a decision that will change everything. He calls the number on Patricia's business card, but instead of asking for help for himself, he asks questions about William's care and whether family members are allowed to visit him at the memory care facility. Patricia's assistant explains that Mr. Hartwell is in a secure unit designed for patients with severe dementia, and that visits are restricted to immediate family members for his emotional stability. However, she mentions that Mr. Hartwell has been asking repeatedly about someone named Marcus, and the staff has been concerned about his agitation regarding this person. Marcus feels a surge of protective instinct that reminds him of his military medic training, when he would risk his own safety to help wounded soldiers who depended on him for survival. William may not be bleeding on a battlefield, but he's vulnerable and possibly being exploited by people who should protect him. That afternoon, Marcus uses more of Patricia's money to buy decent clothes and visits the downtown library to research Arizona laws regarding elder abuse, guardianship procedures, and the rights of individuals with dementia. What he discovers makes him realize that William's situation may be more dire than a simple family disagreement about care options. According to Arizona statute, a person can be declared legally incompetent based on medical testimony and evidence of inability to manage personal affairs, but the process requires court oversight and advocacy for the individual's rights. If William was committed without proper legal representation or adequate medical evaluation, his family may have violated laws designed to protect vulnerable adults. Marcus also learns about the financial implications of incompetency declarations for individuals with significant assets. Once someone is declared incompetent, their family members can assume control of all financial decisions, including business operations, charitable giving, and estate planning. For someone with William's wealth, the stakes of such a declaration amount to billions of dollars. Armed with this knowledge, Marcus makes another decision that will require courage he hasn't needed since his military service. He decides to visit William at the memory care facility, not as a friend bringing comfort, but as a witness who may be the only person willing to advocate for an elderly man whose family may be more interested in his money than his welfare. The next morning, Marcus dresses in his cleanest clothes and takes a city bus to the affluent suburb where Sunset Manor Memory Care provides what their website describes as luxury accommodations for individuals with dementia and Alzheimer's disease. The facility resembles an expensive hotel more than a medical institution, with manicured landscaping and elegant architecture that projects comfort and competence. Marcus approaches the reception desk with the confidence he once carried as a military medic, knowing that authority often depends more on bearing than credentials. "I'm here to visit William Hartwell. I'm Marcus Rivera, the person who found him when he was lost last week." The receptionist, a middle-aged woman with kind eyes, checks her computer with obvious confusion. "I'm sorry, Mr. Rivera, but Mr. Hartwell is in our secure unit, and his family has restricted his visitors to immediate relatives only." His daughter was very specific about maintaining his privacy during this adjustment period. Marcus had expected this obstacle and prepared accordingly. "Ma'am, I understand the family's concern, but Mr. Hartwell has been asking for me according to your own staff reports. Sometimes dementia patients do better when they maintain connections to people who represent stability during their confusion. I'm not asking to take him anywhere or make any decisions about his care. I just want to see if talking with me might help calm his agitation." The receptionist's expression softens as Marcus speaks, and he can see her weighing the facility's rules against her obvious concern for William's emotional welfare. "Let me check with our head nurse." She mentioned that Mr. Hartwell has been quite distressed about someone named Marcus. While waiting for the nurse, Marcus observes the facility's common areas, noting that most residents appear heavily medicated and that staff interactions seem focused more on managing behavior than providing meaningful engagement. The contrast with his morning with William, when gentle conversation and patience had kept the elderly man calm and cooperative, suggests that the facility's approach may prioritize convenience over individual care. Nurse Patricia Williams emerges from the secure unit with obvious relief at seeing Marcus. "Mr. Rivera, I'm so glad you're here. Mr. Hartwell has been asking for you constantly since his arrival. He becomes agitated whenever we try to redirect him to other topics, and he insists that you promise to help him find Elizabeth." Marcus follows Nurse Williams through a series of locked doors, each requiring her security card to open, until they reach what appears to be a comfortable but clearly institutional living space. The furniture is expensive but arranged to prevent injury, with no sharp corners or breakable objects, and the windows are designed to let in light without providing access to the outside world. William sits in a chair by the window, staring out at a courtyard garden with the same lost expression Marcus remembers from their morning together. He's wearing institutional clothing rather than his own pajamas, and his hands rest in his lap with the defeated posture of someone who has given up trying to control his environment. "William," Marcus says gently, approaching the chair slowly so as not to startle him. "It's Marcus. I promised I'd check on you and make sure you're okay." William's face transforms with recognition and relief as he looks up at Marcus, his eyes lighting up with the first joy Nurse Williams has seen since his arrival. "Marcus, I knew you'd come. I knew you wouldn't forget about me. They keep telling me Elizabeth isn't here, but I know she must be looking for me." Marcus sits in the chair beside William, noting that the elderly man appears more heavily medicated than he had been during their morning together. His movements are slower, his speech slightly slurred, and his eyes have the glassy quality that suggests pharmaceutical intervention beyond what might be medically necessary. "William, how are you feeling? Are they taking good care of you here?" Marcus asks, though he's already concerned about William's obvious overmedication. William leans closer to Marcus, his voice dropping to a whisper as if he's sharing a secret. "They keep giving me pills, Marcus. Lots of pills. They say it's to help me feel better, but I feel fuzzy. I can't think clearly. I can't remember things I know I should remember." Marcus exchanges a look with Nurse Williams, who has been listening to their conversation with obvious interest. He wonders if William's increased confusion might be the result of medication designed to support his family's claim that he requires institutional care rather than genuine medical necessity. "What kind of pills are they giving you, William?" Marcus asks gently. William looks around nervously before responding, as if he's afraid of being overheard. "I don't know. The doctor comes every morning and gives me shots. He says it's for my own good, but Elizabeth always said I should ask questions about any medicine. She was smart about those things." Marcus's concern deepens as he realizes that William is receiving daily injections rather than standard oral medications typically used for dementia care. The combination of injectable medications and William's obvious oversedation raises serious questions about whether his treatment plan is designed to manage his condition or to ensure his continued compliance with institutional control. "Nurse Williams." Marcus addresses the woman who has been watching their interaction with obvious concern. "Is Mr. Hartwell's current medication regimen standard for someone with his diagnosis?" Nurse Williams glances around to make sure they won't be overheard before responding honestly. "Mr. Rivera, I've been a dementia care nurse for 15 years, and I've never seen a patient require daily injections unless they were combative or dangerous to themselves or others. Mr. Hartwell has been confused and sad, but never aggressive. The medication orders came directly from Dr. Reynolds, who works exclusively with the Hartwell family." Marcus feels his protective instincts flaring as he realizes that William may be being chemically restrained not for his own welfare, but to prevent him from communicating effectively with outsiders who might question his family's decisions. The pattern emerging suggests a calculated effort to maintain William in a state of confusion that supports his legal incompetency while preventing him from advocating for himself. The revelation that Dr. Reynolds works exclusively with the Hartwell family rather than being an independent physician raises additional concerns about conflicts of interest in William's medical care. A doctor whose income depends entirely on one family's satisfaction has powerful incentives to provide treatments that serve the family's interests rather than the patient's best medical outcomes. Marcus spends another hour with William, during which the elderly man's cognitive function appears to improve slightly as the effects of his morning medication begin to wear off. William becomes more articulate and coherent, sharing memories about Elizabeth that demonstrate his capacity for complex emotional processing and detailed recall of significant life events. "Marcus, I need to tell you something important," William says during a moment when Nurse Williams has stepped away to check on another patient. "Before Elizabeth died, we talked about what would happen to the company and our money. She made me promise to use our wealth to help people who couldn't help themselves." William's voice carries the clarity of someone whose fundamental values remain intact despite his cognitive struggles. "We set up plans to give most of our money to charities that help veterans, medical research, and families struggling with illness. Elizabeth said that since we had been blessed with wealth, we had a responsibility to bless others. Marcus listens intently as William continues, his words becoming more urgent as he struggles to communicate something he perceives as critical. Patricia and David don't understand. They think the money belongs to them, but Elizabeth and I always knew it belonged to the world. We were just the stewards. The implications of William's statement hit Marcus like a physical blow. If William had been planning to donate the majority of his wealth to charity, his children would have enormous financial motivation to have him declared incompetent before those plans could be implemented. A $12 billion inheritance would be reduced to a fraction of its value if William's charitable intentions were legally executed. Marcus realizes that his rescue of William from traffic may have provided Patricia and David with the perfect justification for emergency guardianship proceedings that would prevent their father from completing his intended charitable giving. The timing of William's public confusion, witnessed by an independent third party, would be powerful evidence supporting claims that he could no longer manage his affairs competently. "William, did you tell Patricia and David about these charitable plans?" Marcus asks, though he suspects he already knows the answer. William's expression grows troubled as he tries to access memories that may have been affected by his medication regimen. "I think so. Elizabeth always said we should include the children in important decisions." But they seemed upset. Patricia kept talking about medical expenses, and David mentioned something about protecting the family legacy. Marcus understands now why Patricia had been so insistent on secrecy regarding William's rescue, and why the family's response had felt more like crisis management than genuine relief. If William's charitable intentions threatened their inheritance, his children would need to act quickly to establish legal control over his assets before he could implement his plans. The sound of approaching footsteps interrupts their conversation as Dr. Reynolds enters the room, carrying his medical bag and wearing the professionally pleasant expression that Marcus has learned to distrust. The doctor's presence immediately changes William's demeanor, as if he associates Dr. Reynolds with the confusion and helplessness that follow his daily injections. "Mr. Hartwell, how are we feeling today?" Dr. Reynolds asks with practiced cheer, though Marcus notes that the question is directed at William as if he were a child, rather than a man who built a pharmaceutical empire. "I see you have a visitor. That's wonderful." Dr. Reynolds turns to Marcus with polite interest that doesn't quite mask his curiosity about why a homeless veteran would be visiting his patient. "You must be the Good Samaritan who found Mr. Hartwell when he was lost. The family mentioned your heroic actions." Marcus stands to shake the doctor's hand, using the opportunity to study the man who holds such influence over William's treatment. Dr. Reynolds appears to be in his 40s with the smooth confidence of someone accustomed to having his medical authority accepted without question. His expensive clothing and accessories suggest a level of compensation that goes beyond typical geriatric psychiatry. "I'm Marcus Rivera. I wanted to check on William and see how he's adjusting to his new environment." Marcus keeps his voice neutral, though every instinct warns him that Dr. Reynolds represents a threat to William's welfare rather than a source of medical care. "How thoughtful of you," Dr. Reynolds replies, though his smile doesn't reach his eyes. "Mr. Hartwell has been struggling with the transition, which is quite normal for patients with advancing dementia. We've been adjusting his medication to help him feel more comfortable and less agitated." Marcus watches as Dr. Reynolds prepares another injection, the syringe containing a clear liquid that could be any number of psychiatric medications. The casualness with which the doctor approaches this daily ritual suggests that William's pharmaceutical restraint has become routine rather than medically necessary. "What medication are you giving him?" Marcus asks, using his military medic background to justify the question. "I have some medical training, and I'm curious about current treatments for Alzheimer's patients." Dr. Reynolds pauses in his preparation, clearly not expecting questions about his treatment protocols from a homeless veteran. It's a combination of medications designed to manage his anxiety and confusion. The specific details are confidential medical information, of course. Marcus notes that Dr. Reynolds has avoided naming any specific medications, which would be standard practice when discussing treatment with someone claiming medical knowledge. The evasiveness suggests that William's treatment regimen might not withstand professional scrutiny from independent medical experts. "William seemed much calmer and more coherent when I spent time with him last week," Marcus observes. "He was able to have meaningful conversations and showed good memory for emotional details about his wife. Has his condition deteriorated significantly since then?" The question clearly makes Dr. Reynolds uncomfortable, as it implies that William's current heavily medicated state might not be medically necessary. Dementia can be unpredictable, Mr. Rivera. Patients often have periods of apparent clarity followed by episodes of severe confusion. Consistent medication helps prevent the agitation that can accompany these fluctuations. Marcus wants to challenge Dr. Reynolds' explanation, but he realizes that doing so might result in his being banned from future visits with William. Instead, he decides to gather more information before confronting the medical and legal issues surrounding William's care. "William, I need to go now, but I'll try to visit you again soon," Marcus says, taking the elderly man's hand in both of his. "Remember what you told me about Elizabeth and the roses. Some beautiful things are worth protecting no matter how difficult it becomes." William's eyes focus on Marcus with surprising intensity, as if he understands that more is being communicated than the surface meaning of the words. "Marcus, you're a good friend." Elizabeth would say that good friends don't abandon each other when things get difficult. As Marcus leaves Sunset Manor, he carries with him the weight of William's trust and the growing certainty that the elderly man is being systematically drugged to prevent him from accessing his own mental capabilities. The contrast between William's articulate discussion of his charitable intentions and his heavily medicated state during medical visits suggests a pattern of pharmaceutical manipulation designed to support legal claims of incompetency. That evening, Marcus uses the public computers at the downtown library to research Dr. Reynolds' background and medical credentials. What he discovers reinforces his suspicions about the doctor's relationship with the Hartwell family and raises additional questions about the ethics of William's treatment. Dr. Jason Reynolds specializes in geriatric psychiatry, with a particular focus on what his professional website describes as complex family situations involving inheritance and estate planning. His client testimonials emphasize his willingness to work with families to develop treatment plans that support their loved ones' best interests, language that Marcus recognizes as potentially euphemistic for treatments that serve family financial goals rather than patient welfare. Dr. Reynolds' medical license shows no disciplinary actions, but Marcus discovers that he has testified as an expert witness in numerous guardianship proceedings involving wealthy elderly individuals. In each case, Dr. Reynolds' testimony supported family claims that their relatives were incompetent to manage their own Baltimore's affairs, testimony that resulted in millions of dollars in assets being transferred to family control. The pattern emerging from Dr. Reynolds' professional history suggests that he operates as what legal experts call a hired gun for families seeking to gain control of elderly relatives, wealth through medical rather than legal means, by providing pharmaceutical treatments that impair cognitive function and then testifying about patients' incompetency. Doctors like Reynolds can help families bypass estate planning intentions that don't serve their financial interests. Marcus also researches Arizona's Adult Protective Services laws and discovers that concerned individuals can file reports about suspected elder abuse, including medical abuse involving inappropriate medication or treatment. The challenge lies in gathering evidence sufficient to trigger an investigation, particularly when the alleged abuse is being perpetrated by medical professionals with legitimate credentials. Over the next several days, Marcus develops a plan that will require him to take risks similar to those he faced during military operations in Afghanistan. He decides to document William's cognitive function during periods when his medication levels are lowest, hoping to demonstrate that the elderly man's mental capacity is significantly better than his medical records might suggest. Marcus also begins reaching out to other organizations and individuals who might have insights into the Hartwell family's dynamics and William's original charitable intentions. His search leads him to Father Miguel Santos, the chaplain at a veterans hospital where William had apparently volunteered before his cognitive decline became apparent. Father Santos agrees to meet Marcus at a small cafe near the hospital, curious about why a homeless veteran would be asking about one of their former volunteers. The priest appears to be in his 60s with the gentle bearing of someone who has spent decades counseling people through difficult transitions and losses. William Hartwell was one of our most dedicated volunteers. Father Santos explains as they sit over coffee that Marcus can barely afford but considers essential to his investigation. He spent every Tuesday morning visiting with veterans who were struggling with PTSD, addiction, or family problems. He had a gift for listening without judging. Marcus feels a surge of connection to William, realizing that the elderly man had been serving veterans like himself during the years when Marcus was struggling with his own post-military transition. The irony that William had been helping homeless veterans while Marcus was becoming one creates a sense of cosmic justice in their eventual meeting. Did William ever mention his plans for his wealth or his family's feelings about his charitable giving? Marcus asks, hoping that Father Santos might have insights into the family dynamics that led to William's current situation. Father Santos's expression grows thoughtful as he considers how much he can share about conversations that may have been confidential. William talked often about his responsibility to use his blessings to help others. He said that Elizabeth had taught him that wealth was a loan from God that needed to be repaid through service. I got the impression that not everyone in his family shared that perspective. The priest's words confirm Marcus's growing understanding of the conflict between William's charitable intentions and his children's financial expectations. Father Santos also mentions that William had been working with an attorney to establish a foundation that would continue his charitable work after his death, planning that would have significantly reduced the inheritance available to Patricia and David. "Have you seen William recently?" Father Santos asks. "Several veterans have asked about him since he stopped volunteering. We heard that he was having health problems, but no one seemed to know the details." Marcus explains William's current situation in general terms, avoiding specifics that might violate the family's privacy while still conveying his concerns about the elderly man's welfare. Father Santos listens with obvious worry, his experience with vulnerable populations making him sensitive to the signs of potential exploitation. "Marcus, I want you to know that William talked about you during his last few visits here," Father Santos says, surprising Marcus with this revelation. "He didn't know your name, but he mentioned meeting a homeless veteran who had served as a medic. He said that talking with you had reminded him of why his charitable work was so important." Marcus realizes that his brief encounter with William outside the coffee shop had been more significant than he understood at the time. William had apparently been thinking about their conversation during the weeks that followed, finding in Marcus's story a reminder of his own mission to help veterans who needed support and understanding. "Did William seem cognitively impaired when you saw him?" Marcus asks, hoping to establish a timeline for William's decline that might help determine whether his current condition is the result of disease progression or pharmaceutical intervention. Father Santos considers the question carefully before responding. William was definitely more forgetful than he had been in previous years, and he sometimes seemed confused about dates or details, but his core personality and values were completely intact. He was still the same compassionate, intelligent man who had been volunteering with us for 5 years. The priest's assessment matches Marcus's own observations of William during their morning together, and conflicts with the heavily medicated, barely coherent person Marcus had visited at Sunset Manor. The dramatic difference in William's cognitive function over such a short period suggests that factors beyond natural disease progression are affecting his mental state. Marcus leaves his meeting with Father Santos with renewed determination to help William and a clearer understanding of what the elderly man had been trying to accomplish before his family intervened. William's charitable work with veterans creates a personal connection that transforms Marcus's involvement from simple Good Samaritan assistance to a mission that honors both William's service to others and Marcus's own military commitment to protecting those who cannot protect themselves. That evening, Marcus calls the Arizona Adult Protective Services hotline to report his concerns about William's treatment at Sunset Manor. The caseworker who takes his call, Sandra Martinez, listens carefully to his account of William's cognitive function during their initial meeting compared to his heavily medicated state during recent visits. "Mr. Rivera, what you're describing could constitute medical abuse if medications are being used inappropriately to control behavior rather than treat legitimate medical conditions," Sandra explains. However, investigating cases involving wealthy families and private medical providers requires substantial evidence and careful coordination with law enforcement. Sandra schedules an appointment to meet with Marcus the following day to take a formal statement and review any documentation he has gathered. She also explains that Adult Protective Services has the authority to request independent medical evaluations and to investigate complaints about guardianship proceedings that may not serve an individual's best interests. Marcus spends that night organizing the information he has gathered about William's case, including notes from their conversations, observations about his medication levels and cognitive function, and background research on Dr. Reynolds and the Hartwell family's financial motivations. The process reminds him of preparing intelligence reports during his military service, when attention to detail could mean the difference between mission success and failure. The next morning, Marcus meets Sandra Martinez at the Adult Protective Services office in downtown Phoenix. Sandra appears to be in her 40s, with the professional competence of someone who has investigated numerous cases of elder abuse and exploitation. Her office walls display certificates and awards, recognizing her work protecting vulnerable adults, creating an atmosphere of credibility that gives Marcus confidence in her ability to help William. Mr. Rivera, based on what you've told me, there are several concerning factors in Mr. Hartwell's situation. Sandra begins after reviewing Marcus's documentation. The rapid decline in cognitive function following institutionalization, the use of daily injections rather than standard oral medications, and the family's financial motivation to maintain his incompetency all raise red flags. Sandra explains that Adult Protective Services has encountered similar cases where wealthy elderly individuals were subjected to inappropriate medical treatments designed to support guardianship claims that served family financial interests rather than the individual's welfare. These cases often involve collaboration between unethical family members and medical professionals who prioritize financial compensation over patient care. What can be done to help William? Marcus asks, though he's prepared to hear that the legal protections for wealthy individuals may be more complex than those available to ordinary citizens. Sandra outlines a process that begins with a formal investigation request that would require Sunset Manor to provide William's complete medical records and treatment protocols. Adult Protective Services would also arrange for an independent medical evaluation by a geriatric psychiatrist who specializes in dementia care and has no financial relationship with the Hartwell family. The challenge, Sandra continues, is that families with significant resources often have legal teams prepared to challenge any investigation that threatens their control over an elderly relative's assets. We need to build a strong case before we take any action that might alert them to our involvement. Marcus understands that helping William will require the same kind of strategic planning and coordinated execution that characterized successful military operations. The enemy in this case is not a foreign adversary, but a family willing to exploit their father's vulnerability for financial gain, supported by medical professionals who prioritize profit over patient welfare. Sandra assigns Marcus a case number and provides him with contact information for legal aid organizations that specialize in elder rights advocacy. She also gives him detailed instructions about documenting any future interactions with William, emphasizing the importance of noting specific examples of cognitive function that contradict claims of severe dementia. Mr. Rivera, I want you to understand that taking on a case like this requires significant personal commitment and involves some risk, Sandra warns. Wealthy families often respond to investigations by attacking the credibility of complainants. You should be prepared for attempts to discredit your observations or motivations. Marcus accepts Sandra's warning with the same stoic determination he brought to dangerous missions in Afghanistan. William's trust and friendship have become more important to him than his own comfort or safety, and the elderly man's vulnerability awakens protective instincts that have been dormant since Marcus left military service. Over the following weeks, Marcus establishes a routine of visiting William at Sunset Manor during different times of day, hoping to observe patterns in his medication schedule and cognitive function that might provide evidence of inappropriate treatment. The visits require careful planning, as Marcus must balance his desire to document William's condition with the need to maintain access to the facility. During these visits, Marcus discovers that William's mental clarity follows a predictable pattern that correlates with the timing of his daily injections. Early in the day, before Dr. Reynolds' morning visit, William appears more alert and capable of complex conversation. Following his injection, William becomes increasingly confused and lethargic, often spending hours staring vacantly at the television or sleeping in his chair. Marcus also observes that William's physical health appears to be declining under the current treatment regimen. The elderly man has lost weight, his movements have become unsteady, and he often complains of nausea and dizziness that suggest side effects from medications rather than symptoms of dementia progression. Most significantly, Marcus documents several conversations during which William demonstrates detailed memory of his business operations, charitable intentions, and concerns about his family's management of his affairs. These conversations occur during periods when William's medication levels are lowest, suggesting that his cognitive impairment may be pharmaceutically induced rather than the result of irreversible brain disease. Marcus, I need you to remember something important, William says during one of these lucid periods, gripping Marcus's arm with urgent intensity. Before they brought me here, I was working with a lawyer named Catherine Morrison to set up a foundation that would donate most of my money to help veterans and medical research. Patricia and David know about this, and I think that's why they had me committed. William's revelation provides Marcus with crucial information about the timeline and motivation behind his institutionalization. If William had been actively working with an attorney to implement charitable giving plans that would reduce his children's inheritance, the family would have powerful incentives to have him declared incompetent before those plans could be completed. Marcus carefully notes the name Catherine Morrison and decides to contact the attorney to verify William's account and potentially gain an ally in protecting the elderly man's legal rights. The conversation also confirms Marcus's suspicions that William's commitment to Sunset Manor was strategically timed to prevent him from completing legal documents that would conflict with his family's financial interests. William, do you remember signing any papers since you've been here? Marcus asks, wondering if the family might be using William's medicated state to obtain signatures on documents that would formalize their control over his assets. William's expression grows troubled as he tries to access memories that may have been affected by his pharmaceutical regimen. Dr. Reynolds brings papers sometimes. He says they're just medical forms, but Patricia is always there when he asks me to sign them. I can't think clearly when they give me the shots, Marcus. Everything gets fuzzy and confusing. Marcus realizes that William may be being coerced into signing legal documents while under the influence of medications that impair his judgment and cognitive function. If true, such actions would constitute a serious form of elder abuse and could potentially invalidate any legal agreements obtained through such methods. The accumulating evidence of William's inappropriate treatment and potential exploitation creates a compelling case for Adult Protective Services intervention. But Marcus knows that building a successful case against a wealthy family with sophisticated legal resources will require more than his observations alone. He needs to find other witnesses and documentary evidence that will corroborate his concerns about William's welfare. Marcus's next step involves tracking down Catherine Morrison, the attorney William mentioned as helping him establish his charitable foundation. Finding Morrison proves challenging, as William's medication-affected memory couldn't provide complete contact information, but Marcus eventually locates her through the Arizona State Bar Directory. Catherine Morrison practices elder law and estate planning from a small but well-regarded firm in Scottsdale. When Marcus calls her office and explains his connection to William Hartwell, Morrison agrees to meet with him immediately, her urgency suggesting that she shares his concerns about William's current situation. Morrison appears to be in her 50s with the sharp intelligence and ethical bearing that Marcus associates with attorneys who chose their specialty based on principle rather than profit potential. Her office displays numerous awards for pro bono legal services and advocacy for seniors' rights, creating an atmosphere that reinforces Marcus's confidence in her commitment to protecting vulnerable clients. Mr. Rivera, I've been extremely worried about William since his family had him committed. Morrison begins, her professional composure barely containing her obvious frustration. We were in the middle of finalizing documentation for the Hartwell Foundation when he suddenly became unavailable for meetings. Patricia claimed that his cognitive decline had become severe, but that wasn't consistent with my recent interactions with him. Morrison explains that she had been working with William for several months to establish a charitable foundation that would receive the majority of his wealth upon his death. The foundation's mission focused on supporting veterans, services, medical research, and educational opportunities for disadvantaged children, causes that William and Elizabeth had supported throughout their marriage. William was completely competent when we discussed the foundation's structure and objectives, Morrison continues. He understood complex legal concepts, asked sophisticated questions about tax implications, and demonstrated clear reasoning about his charitable priorities. His cognitive function was obviously affected by grief over Elizabeth's death, but his decision-making capacity was intact. Marcus shares his observations about William's cognitive function during periods when his medication levels appear lowest, describing conversations that demonstrate continued mental clarity despite his family's claims of severe dementia. Morrison listens with obvious relief, as Marcus's account confirms her own assessment of William's competency. Mr. Rivera, what you're telling me could be crucial for challenging the guardianship proceedings that Patricia and David have initiated, Morrison explains. If we can demonstrate that William's cognitive impairment is pharmaceutically induced rather than the result of irreversible dementia, we might be able to restore his legal capacity to make his own decisions. Morrison also reveals that she has been contacted by other professionals who worked with William before his commitment, including his longtime financial advisor and the director of a veterans organization that had received significant donations from the Hartwell family. Each of these individuals has expressed concerns about the dramatic change in William's cognitive function and the family's sudden restrictions on his communication with outside professionals. We're dealing with a systematic effort to isolate William from anyone who might question his treatment or support his original intentions, Morrison continues. Patricia and David have surrounded him with medical and legal professionals who have financial incentives to support their version of his incompetency. Marcus realizes that William's situation represents a form of imprisonment that is legal under current guardianship laws but morally indefensible given the financial motivations involved. The elderly man is being held against his will, chemically restrained to prevent effective communication, and systematically isolated from people who might advocate for his actual wishes rather than his family's financial interests. Morrison outlines a legal strategy that would challenge the guardianship proceedings on the grounds that William's incompetency determination was based on inappropriate medical treatment rather than genuine cognitive decline. Such a challenge would require expert medical testimony, independent psychological evaluation, and documentation of William's cognitive function during periods when he is not under the influence of unnecessary medications. The key, Morrison explains, is demonstrating that William retains sufficient cognitive capacity to understand his financial situation and make informed decisions about his charitable giving. If we can establish that his apparent confusion is medication-induced, we can argue that the guardianship was obtained through fraudulent medical testimony. Marcus agrees to continue documenting his interactions with William and to coordinate with Adult Protective Services to ensure that any investigation includes the legal dimensions of the case. Morrison also provides him with contact information for other professionals who had worked with William, creating a network of potential witnesses who could testify about his cognitive function before his commitment. As Marcus leaves Morrison's office, he feels the weight of responsibility that comes with becoming William's primary advocate in a legal and medical system that appears designed to protect institutional interests rather than individual rights. The homeless veteran who had simply tried to help a confused elderly man cross the street safely has become the key witness in a case that could determine whether a $12 billion fortune serves charitable purposes or family greed. That evening, Marcus sits in his small motel room reviewing the notes and documentation he has accumulated about William's case. The evidence points toward a coordinated effort by William's children to gain control of his wealth by rendering him legally incompetent through inappropriate medical treatment, a scheme that exploits elder care systems and guardianship laws to achieve outcomes that serve family financial interests rather than the individual's welfare. Marcus understands that challenging the Hartwell family will require courage similar to what he demonstrated during military combat, but the stakes extend beyond William's individual situation. If wealthy families can systematically exploit elderly relatives through medical manipulation and legal manipulation, no aging person with significant assets is safe from similar predation. The next phase of Marcus's mission to help William will require coordinating multiple investigations, gathering expert medical testimony, and potentially testifying in court proceedings, where his credibility as a homeless veteran will be challenged by expensive attorneys representing family interests. But William's trust and friendship have given Marcus a sense of purpose that has been missing since he left military service, and he approaches the challenges ahead with the same determination that once drove him to save wounded soldiers under enemy fire. The breakthrough comes 3 weeks later, when Marcus arrives at Sunset Manor to find William in severe distress, shaking uncontrollably and calling out for help. Nurse Williams meets Marcus at the entrance with obvious panic, explaining that William had refused his morning injection and was experiencing what Dr. Reynolds claimed were dangerous withdrawal symptoms requiring immediate sedation. Marcus finds William lucid but frightened, his hands trembling as he grips Marcus's jacket. "They're trying to make me sign papers giving Patricia control of everything. I said no, and now they want to increase my medication. Marcus, I'm scared they're going to make me disappear." Dr. Reynolds arrives with a syringe containing what he describes as emergency medication for William's agitation, but Marcus blocks his access to the patient. "Dr. Reynolds, Mr. Hartwell appears coherent and is refusing treatment. Don't you need his consent or a court order to medicate him against his will?" The confrontation that follows exposes the illegal nature of William's treatment as Dr. Reynolds threatens to have Marcus arrested for interfering with medical care, revealing that the daily injections have never been properly authorized and exist outside standard medical protocols for dementia patients. Within hours, Adult Protective Services arrives with law enforcement to investigate Marcus's emergency report. Sandra Martinez brings an independent psychiatrist who evaluates William during his period of mental clarity, documenting cognitive function that directly contradicts his incompetency determination. The psychiatric evaluation reveals that William understands his financial situation completely, can articulate his charitable intentions clearly, and demonstrates decision-making capacity that meets all legal standards for competency. Dr. Reynolds's treatment records show no medical justification for the pharmaceutical regimen that had been keeping William chemically restrained. Patricia and David arrive at the facility with their attorney, demanding that the investigation be halted and threatening lawsuits against everyone involved. But the evidence of elder abuse is overwhelming, and law enforcement places both Dr. Reynolds and Patricia under arrest for conspiracy to commit fraud and elder abuse. The legal proceedings that follow expose a network of corrupt medical professionals and attorneys who specialize in helping wealthy families gain control of elderly relatives' assets through manufactured incompetency claims. William's case becomes the centerpiece of a federal investigation that ultimately protects dozens of other vulnerable seniors from similar exploitation. 6 months later, Marcus stands beside William in the boardroom of Hartwell Pharmaceuticals as the elderly man signs the final documents establishing the foundation that will donate $11 billion to charitable causes. William's cognitive function has returned to near normal levels following the cessation of inappropriate medications, and his gratitude toward Marcus has transformed both their lives. The Hartwell Foundation's first major initiative provides housing and support services for homeless veterans, with Marcus serving as program director and drawing upon his own experiences to design services that address the complex needs of former military personnel struggling with transition to civilian life. William insists that Marcus move into the guest house on his estate, providing stability and companionship that benefits both men as they build their unlikely friendship. The homeless veteran who once slept behind restaurant dumpsters now manages charitable programs worth hundreds of millions of dollars, using his position to ensure that other vulnerable people receive the help and dignity they deserve. Patricia and David receive suspended sentences in exchange for cooperating with the federal investigation, but they forfeit any claim to their father's wealth beyond modest trust funds that provide comfortable but not extravagant livings. William's decision to forgive his children while protecting his charitable intentions demonstrates the wisdom and compassion that Marcus recognized during their first morning together. On quiet evenings, Marcus and William sit in Elizabeth's rose garden, now restored to its former beauty, discussing the projects they're funding and the lives they're changing through organized compassion. William often mentions that Elizabeth would have loved Marcus and appreciated how he protected both William's safety and his dreams of serving others. The brass compass that William gives Marcus on the anniversary of their first meeting bears an inscription that captures the transformation both men have experienced. To Marcus, who showed me that some rescues change both the saved and the savior. True north points towards service. Marcus keeps the compass on his desk at the foundation office, a reminder that his military training in protecting others found its ultimate purpose not on foreign battlefields but on the streets of his own city, where a moment of courage led to a lifetime of meaningful service to people who need advocates and champions. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up, just click and check them out.